Hello, 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 hello. What's up, people? What's going on? What's going on? Hey, Jordan here. What's going on? Welcome to the channel. Happy Sunday. Hey, so I want to jump on here. Hoping again to do these more frequently. Probably going to do a series very soon. Probably going through Neville's books, obviously. Obviously, there's been a huge upsurge of interest in this kind of Bible study, but let me be clear, it's not a Bible study. We're not talking through Christianity. We're not talking through any theological kind of stuff in the typical sense, but we are looking at it from Neville's perspective or the mystical perspective or the psychological perspective. And so I think it's super helpful that obviously I am trained in psychology and behavioral science, because I can come at this from a psychological perspective, which will hopefully be helpful to you. So I do want to jump on and talk to you about three things. Let me just fix this really quick. Three things today, and again, kind of leads you in just different perspectives as we jump into deep dives, and then also just ask you, if we are going to do a weekly meetup, if we are going to be, meeting weekly, what are those days and times that work best for everybody, and just leave that here. If you're looking for coaching, it's a science-backed coaching, neuroscience-backed coaching, psychological-backed coaching, trained and all this kind of good stuff, then get in touch. I have an email on my bio. Also have a link to a private free Discord group, a super supportive group of people just like you who want to manifest what they want and make the world a better place. Because really, ultimately, that's what Neville says, right? He says, you should get to a point where you can use the law to help the world be better. And yeah, I'm going to do a talk on that one rather than kind of jump into this, because I really want to deep dive into these three areas. And you can kind of see it in the title. But again, if you're looking for coaching, science-backed, supportive community, all that good stuff, get in touch. I do offer payment plans and all this kind of good stuff. So let's get this party started, shall we? So what I want to do is I want to talk to you about those three things in the title, okay? And I'm going to work backwards, and we're going to make our way through that, okay? Now, some of this content, some of it, not all of it, can be seen also on my Reddit under OK-Initiative, and that's my profile over there. So let's talk about the future self, but I want to talk about it very, very differently. One of the questions that I have been deep diving into as part of my own journey is, where do scenes come from? Right, so let's kind of define that for those of you who are jumping on and you've never heard of Neville's work, or you're very, very new, and you may hear the word scene, but then you may think of something that isn't really what I'm talking about. As we know, we all use language, and so language in and of itself is extremely restrictive and very, very dynamic, which means it can change depending on who's listening, right? So let's talk about a scene. What it is, where do they come from, though? Right? Because where these scenes come from matter. If you don't do the deep work or the awareness work of trying to discover where your scenes are coming from, you will just be regurgitating and living a life that you don't want to be living. Okay? And we all of us deserve a life that we're worthy of, right? And so why don't we talk about what a scene is, what it is in neuroscience, why the brain reacts to it in the way it does. And then we're going to talk about the scene. And then, like I said, we're going to work our way back through these three topics that I listed in the title. So let's do this. A scene is simply a movie. It's a mental story. Your brain is a narrative-making machine. It's a pattern-finding machine. Okay? So what that means is your brain is designed to find patterns. And here's the thing. To fill in patterns where there aren't even any patterns. So research has shown, for example, perception studies has shown that, when we are attending to something, meaning when we're focusing on something, right? And when I say focus, I don't mean just like, hey, I'm writing a song for today. Let's say you're like a musician, right? No, I mean full on with your actual physical eyes looking at something. What it does is it takes the information based upon your past experiences and fills in everything else around your peripheral vision, meaning what you can't see when you're looking at something ahead of you. And so what it's doing is it's filling in information with more information, but this information is past information. Okay, and so maybe you've been somewhere that looks like this, maybe you have been here before, so it fills it in. right? It's kind of like a perceptual paint by number, right? Do you remember those? Like here, number 1 is red and number 8 is purple. All of this kind of stuff. Your brain is doing this, but it doesn't just do this with visual things. It does it with mental things, with emotional things, right? And mainly the argument is that it's an evolutionary kind of like tool or strategy. One, to create shortcuts, right? This is also where stereotypes come from. But to create mental shortcuts, so your brain doesn't always have to keep, releasing energy, like releasing sugars, glycogen, all of these kinds of things that are released when we're learning and all of it, and unlearning and all of this kind of stuff. And so it's a way in which the brain preserves energy, okay? And like I said, it's also lazy, like mental stereotypes and judgments and all preconceived notions and assumptions that we come into these scenarios where we're like, oh, so that is that because I assumed it was that. Now, there's 2 types of assumptions. I'm not going to get into that today, but you've already heard me use that word in this particular context, and I wanted to kind of highlight that because assumptions can be good and assumptions can be bad. Now, obviously, if you're here and you're wanting to change, then maybe you have some bad assumptions, right? And an assumption is a triple layered entity or a triple layered phenomenon. So check out my Reddit article on that one. I think I actually have a video on here somewhere as well. And I'll probably try to make sure they include it. But so when we're dealing with this question of where do scenes come from, you have to understand and accept the fact that your brain is a scene maker. That is what. So if your brain spoke a language, it would speak the language of scenes. In fact, research shows that when your brain hears verbal words like tree, car, love, whatever it is, it automatically tries to access an image. Okay, so your brain is an image maker. All right, and that's why it's so important that when you go into creating your scenes, you know where they're coming from. Okay, so this is going to be a little bit tricky because most of us are saying, well, I have to go to the past, right, to actually create a scene. There isn't, and that's not a lie, but I want to challenge that, right, in a particular way, and I'm going to make sense of this, okay? You don't have to go to the past to create a scene. Those are helpful, and as somebody who's trained in psychology, and I understand the benefits of therapy, right, that you look at therapy and you go to therapy and you deal with your past and you deal with trauma and limiting beliefs. Those are things I encourage all of my clients to do and things that you should go through and invest in if you have time and resources and all of that kind of good stuff to go to a great therapist, right? But let's say you don't, or you don't want to, or you don't believe that, whatever it is, right, then you still have to figure out, where am I now? And where do I want to be? So when Neville says, listen, you have to know what your desires are, that's really what he's saying. Where are you now? What is in your situation that is causing you to desire anything? Okay. Now, he also, which I think is quite beautiful, argues that if the divine, the imagination, also had a language, it would speak the language of human desire. Whatever you desire is from God. Now, those of you who automatically pop up a red flag and say, wait, what about those who want world domination and all of this kind of stuff? It's the heart behind it. So if somebody wants, for example, world domination, then they don't feel safe in the world, because that's the crux of it. So, right? So if they give themselves safety and they give themselves their own power and their own agency and freedom and all this kind of stuff, and they give it to themselves within, then they've gotten what they desire, right? So that's really, really what he's saying when he says that language or desires are divine in nature, okay? He's not saying, oh, I endorse the next Hitler. He's not saying that at all. There's never a time where he was even indicating that, okay? What he was saying is that you have to understand that there's always languages that are going on, mental languages, okay? So we know that the brain's mental language is image. We know that the divine's language is verbal, or emotional or feeling, right? And so, but through image. So, one of the things that I always say is that, if you really, really want to understand the divine, you have to understand that it speaks in hieroglyphics, but emotional hieroglyphics. So you're using feelings, right, with images to create something. And that's usually the life that you want to live, the life that you deserve to live, right? So, okay, when we are understanding scenes and the development of these scenes and your mind's ability to develop these scenes, you're speaking the divine language, okay? And I have a dog right here somewhere. So I'll learn how to point to things eventually. So when we're coming to this question of where do scenes come from, one, you know that you're already speaking the language of the mind. You're right. That's how the mind understands things. Two, the first thing is that if your scenes are coming from the future, right? Because even though, yes, we know the past and the present and the future, all those are just ways in which we structure our understanding of time, right? But we also know that they also don't exist. I get that. But for the sake of this conversation, your brain tends to go to the past, right? And so part of that, though, is when you're realizing what you're doing when you're developing scenes and stuff, is that most of your scenes are defined by the past, from the past. Meaning, hey, I'm currently not rich, so I want to be rich. Rather than thinking bigger than that, and Neville says, like, listen, think the best of the best. Imagine the best of the best. Hey, Rebecca, how you doing? Welcome, welcome, welcome. So he says, listen, imagine as the best of the best. He's challenging us, by the way. He's saying, listen, you need to actually take what you are creating in your mental imagination, in your scenes, and go further than just relying on your past experiences. Okay, because most people will say, I am not rich right now, so I want to be rich. So what would that be? Like, here's a simple example. Okay, so if you're somebody who is not rich and you're struggling to pay bills and so on and so forth, okay? So what would that be? Well, your actual desire wouldn't be to be rich. Your actual desire would be to be wealthy. That's one step further along, right? That's actually thinking the best of the best because you're going further than your past, right? If you're constantly defining your scenes, meaning what I desire and what I want to manifest in my world, based on your past experiences, which is what you're experiencing now anyways, by the way. So whatever we call this world, people have so many nicknames for this world. I just call it the stage world because I'm in acting and all this kind of stuff. But for a lot of people, right, they call this the 3D. I don't like calling it that because there's actually so many more dimensions to this reality in and of itself, even according to quantum physics, right? And so, yes, this is the world of measurement. Right? This is where we measure things. This is where we occupy our minds with, okay, am I late to work? Am I doing this? Am I doing this correctly? Am I right? We're always in our head, socially speaking, not psychologically. Socially meaning, oh, we're always listening to what other people are saying. Oh, this person has more followers than me. All of this kind of stuff, right? And so we're always kind of forcing ourselves into molds. And even the Apostle Paul said in the Bible, don't conform mentally to the thinking way of this world, right? So again, back to what Neville is talking about here, okay? You do not want to create your scenes from the past. So again, what would that be with the SP, right? So meaning your special other, your significant other, all of this kind of stuff, okay? What would that be for them, right? And Rebecca, thank you for sharing. I'm actually going to answer that because that actually goes in very well with what we're talking about. So hopefully, if you're okay with me doing that, I don't want to spotlight you, though, if you don't want to be. But we can actually use that as a great example to get this point across. So again, the scenes, right, are the mental pictures and the mental movies that you're creating from the first person. Okay, so when I say scenes in movies, do not hear third person. Do not create third person. Okay? And that's also because your brain's autobiographical. Because somebody asked me the other day, like, oh, well, what about Jose Silva? Or what about the mind movies technique? Now, you can manifest those, but the problem is that there's a possibility of aborting it because you're not connecting to it, right? And so the neuroscience shows is that your brain is autobiographical, meaning I'm never telling your story. I'm telling my story. I may look at you and judge you through something that sounds like I'm telling your story, but I'm not. I'm only telling your story through my lens. And so that's how your brain works, right? It's 100% like autobiographical. So you're telling a story through your own lens. That's why it's so important that you do everything in the scene first person. You're always acting from the first person perspective, right? and you're seeing and feeling and touching and interacting with things in your world, mental world, right, through the first person. So if you're driving a car, you're not seeing everything. You're only seeing your hands, right? And if you look down, you see your legs. And if you look further down, you see your shins. And if you look further down, you see your feet. If you look further down, you see the pedals, right? All of this kind of stuff. This is what you're doing when you're creating a scene. But again, if you're creating, like, let's go back to special person or SP, right? And so, and I'm going to use Rebecca if she says, okay, to actually make sense of this, okay? So we're going to make sense of this. But if you're trying to not create a scene, not from the past, because most of us do, right? Then that means you're creating a scene from the future. And so that means the future you is, hey, I want to be with this person. Not because somebody literally asked me this today. Okay, so how do I create a scene, for example, if I want to be with this person, but I eventually want to be married to them? So is the end that you want to be with them or you want to be married? Because here's a possibility. If you're just creating scenes to be with somebody, that doesn't give you the promise of them always sticking around. Does that make sense? So then if your end goal is to marry, right, then your end goal should be that. Your scene should be that. All three to five scenes with 3 to 5 different feelings. And the reason why I say that is because neuroscience shows that we go through what's called affective fatigue. Not effective, affective, as in emotional, right? And your brain basically gets bored of feeling the same things, seeing the same things. And so you always want to keep these scenes fresh, okay? And what'll happen, though, is that people will still think from their own understanding of relationships. So then, and that's what I mean. Most people are creating their scenes from their past understanding, which is always limiting their understanding of now and the future, right? And the future we're always experiencing now anyways. That's what manifestation is. You're bringing the future into the now, which is here, right? And so what you're ultimately wanting to do, though, is you want to see everything from the future tense, right? Or, sorry, present tense, but knowing that mentally you're creating from the future to the present tense. Does that make sense? And the reason why that's important is because you don't want the past to exist. So then, for example, and, let's say Rebecca or anybody for that matter, right, has a past childhood or teenage years or whatever it is, or maybe you had a great upbringing with your family, but you saw a lot of people divorcing around you during your teen years and it made an impression on you. Whatever it is, or like you're looking at statistics and it's like, hey, like 66% of Americans want to be divorced. By the way, I'm making up a statistic. I haven't looked that up yet. But, and if you do, just share it below. So if you're doing that, right, if you are creating from the past, then you're still creating from hang-ups, right? Limiting beliefs, like traumatic moments where you might have seen your parents fight, whatever it is, and you constantly follow through of why am I not manifesting this person, right? And so, the thing is that if you, and like I said at the beginning, I'm not against people going in and dealing and revising their childhood memories. In fact, I would encourage you to do that. But that's also how that can fix the issues that you may be running into, okay? And so what you want to do is you want to be always asking, what does the future self me look like? What does the future self me billionaire look like? What does the future self me with the SP look like? What does the future self me with more confidence look like, right? And so, and the major thing here is that, if you, and by the way, here's how you know, and I'm going to answer Rebecca's second thing, is here's how you know if you're still manifesting from the past. If you're not aware that it's you, right? So this is like the person that you'll meet, and it'll be like the woman or the guy who are like, hey, meet my 7th husband or wife. And they don't get it. Like, they're not like, and I'm like, whoa, that's like, dude, there's a common thread, right? So, you know what I mean? And so that's one. If someone's not aware, or if you're not aware, okay? But on top of this, if you're trying to get to the root causes of this, if you start reacting to something, and it could be a scene on a movie, it could be something you're reading in a book, a friend, a conversation over here in Starbucks, whatever it is, and you're like, oh, hey, that brought up something in me, and it's about relationships or broken relationships. That's where you want to spend your focus, okay? That's where you want to spend your energy trying to kind of decode, right? Deconstruct. go deeper, heal, restore yourself. That's really what partially the Hebrew word for repentance is. It's a return. But what is it returning? Well, it's returning the energy that you've spent so much time focusing on the wrong things, right? And that's what teshuvah means in Hebrew. It's a return, okay? So let's go back to Rebecca. Thank you, Rebecca. So again, I have problems with comparing myself with other girls. So he tells me he is with a young school. Okay, I want to stop manifesting that. Okay, so when you're comparing, okay, and I'm going to kind of contradict myself here, but when you're comparing, that usually means there's a past experience. That usually means that there is an experience that you've had where you feel less than, where you feel like I'm not enough, where you feel like somebody else has more power than you, where you feel like maybe a message from your parents, a handful of experiences in school, whatever it is, judgments from others, where you've taken on, and now you've built an identity around that. That actually brings me to the second part of what I want to talk about today, which is the blueprint, or what Neville calls the structure of the I, right? And we're going to make sense of that. But you've built a structure, or a person, or an avatar, or a personality. And yes, when I want you to hear the avatar, okay, I want you to hear like when you go to like your Facebook or whatever, or your Snapchat, or wherever you go, TikTok, and you have your little image up there, whether it be cartoonish or not. Okay, that's your avatar. I want you to think of that, because there's actually been research, kind of sad actually, that and this is mainly girls, but like basically, because this is what the research is showing, have created their ideal avatar, meaning of themselves. And it's usually a cartoonist version, like a cartoonified version of themselves. And it's usually a skinnier version with like less freckles or less blemishes or less whatever it is, right? And then what they've done is they actually followed them, and they showed that actually it actually created more depression. Why? Because they were comparing themselves against a perfect, like a perfect image, right? Rather than loving themselves as themselves, they were like, oh, I'm not enough all the time. And look at this, I have proof, right? And so the reason why I say that is because when we're deep diving into this research, the research is meant to kind of make you more aware of your own issues, right? So even what I just shared with the avatar and the neuroscience of avatar research is to make you aware of, like, listen, you've created a version of yourself. You've created a personality that is going to do everything in its power to protect you from anything that looks like a threat. So if your personality right now says, hey, I'm not enough, then anything that looks like it's challenging you in your enoughness, I know it's not a word, but in your enoughness, as in feeling enough, right? Feeling like you're valuable, worthy, loved, accepted, all of that, those kinds of things, your ego is going to kick in. So no longer is it just Rebecca, who is fueled by the inner self. It's Rebecca who's fueled by the outer self, the three-dimensional self, the Esau, right, of self, right, the outer man, so to speak, right, in the spiritual sense, okay? And so you're protecting an image, but that image is fueled by memories, okay? And those memories are from the past, and those memories that are in the past tend to be traumatic. So, and I'm somebody, like I said, in the field of psychology, and one of the things that I've realized is we're kind of trauma addicted today. But here's the thing: there is trauma, and I want to talk about this just for a millisecond, right? And when I say trauma addicted, I mean people want to be victims today. Like, that's what social media has become right now. Like, social media has proven that we become addicted to being like people who are traumatized by things. Oh my gosh, that offended me. Oh my gosh, that hurt my feelings. Oh my gosh, this person did that. Rather than actually owning our own emotions, we're blaming others for those emotions that we feel, right? And so, and I'm not saying that we don't need to be more compassionate and more aware and more connected and all of this kind of stuff. But the whole point of me bringing that up, right, is basically trying to get us to be fully aware of where our trauma comes from. And yes, trauma usually tends to come with most of us. Even if you grew up in a perfect household, right? Trauma just means something that has impacted you in such a way that it has shaped your way of looking at the world, right? And you look at your world through that particular lens, almost to the point of OCD. Like, listen, I got to protect myself because I'm right? And you'll even hear people say this, because I'm the only one who's going to be there for myself, right? And even though there's truth in that, and even in the world of manifestation, that's the generic truth that we want to go for, is that you are the only one who's going to rescue yourself, right? But at the same time, there's nothing wrong with wanting other people to do that, but realizing that they're not the ones who are going to do it at all, right? And that's not a bad thing on them. It's just realizing that your power is yours, right? I sound like some sort of kid cartoon, right? But it is true. You know what I mean? Is that you have to realize that your power, every time you react to something, you give that power away to that thing. The question isn't whether you're going to react or not. You will react from cradle to grave, right? From birth to death. It's choosing what you want to react to. That's the art of living. That's the science of being alive, is learning how to get into a space where you are mentally aware of what's going on around you, right? So much so that you can actually guide your emotions. And yes, it takes time. That's a lot of people say, well, how can I do this? And what they're really asking is, can like, is there a pill I can do this overnight with? No. And that's actually a product of our culture, right? Especially Western culture, where we've McDonald-fied everything. I know that's a new word, but we've turned everything into some sort of like fast food thing. Spirituality is not fast food, right? You can't get a drive-through pill, right? We always look at like the Matrix and think, oh, well, look at Morpheus gave Neo a pill. And no. This takes work. Okay. And I mean, even Neville says when he, and this leads me to my second point, like the structure of the eye. But what does structure mean? A structure is a blueprint. What is a blueprint? It's a foundation, right? And a structure, as in a house, right, that you build with a strong foundation, which should be the imagination, which means you shouldn't be going around reacting to everything that you see. Okay, you shouldn't be going around saying, oh my gosh, look at what happened in the news with Trump. Oh my gosh, look at what happened with this, right? And you're constantly just reacting like you're some sort of emotionally uncontrolled vending machine where people are just pressing your buttons and they're releasing things all the time, right? That is not where you should be. If you are there, I would encourage you to think about jumping into things like meditation, right? Or, even working out, according to research, actually helps. Right, doing exercise and all this kind of stuff helps actually slow your brain down a little bit, so you actually think clearer. So, again, the blueprint, when he says that the structure of the eye, what he's saying is not here, not me, not Jordan, not Rebecca, not anybody else who's listening. He's saying the structure of the inner self, structure of God or love or peace or whatever you want to call this thing, right? Source, right? Is that it takes on things. Okay, so it's taking on. So again, when we just started this whole chat today, and I was saying, if you're manifesting from the past, then what are you doing? You're dressing up, because the I itself is formless, which means the I of consciousness, right? So there's I am, right? So all you're saying is the consciousness or God or love or whatever it is, right? This formless, shapeless being is now taking on shape. So anything that you put on after the I am, right, as you may know, is what you experience. Not just what you experience, what you become. Because what you're experiencing is who you are. You're never experiencing what you want. You're experiencing who you are. Okay? And so this is very, very key. Okay? And hopefully that's all helpful to you, Rebecca, as well. Right? Because again, we always think that we're going in to get something. You're never going into the imagination to get anything. You're going into becoming. So you're going in to become the person who has the thing. Right? That's what it is. So it's the difference between somebody who is, I'm going in to drive a car, versus being a person who is a car owner. Does that make sense? So that is ultimately what you want to be aware of when you're trying to fully grasp how to use the law. So when I'm talking about the blueprint of consciousness, that's what Neville is saying. There's a structure to the I am, or there's a structure to the I. Okay? And so when I say structure, you have to think of beliefs, feelings, ideas, history, as in your memories, right? And all of these different things that you are fully taking on, and you're saying, God does this. So when you're saying you're poor, God is poor. When you're saying I am rich and wealthy and financially stable, then God is rich and financially stable, right? And that's what Neville is talking about when he talks about the eye of man, or the idea of the structure of being. And he uses that phrase quite a bit, right? Or he talks about structure, right? And what he's really, really getting at is your beliefs mold and shape this being into whatever it is that you desire. Okay? But if you're not learning how to map out and control and guide and feed your desires the right food, right, the right mental food, then it's going to either be starved or obese with the things you don't want, right? And so you learn how to get really good at becoming an artist, becoming a chef, right? Becoming all, and I'm using metaphors, but these are all metaphors of how you can become the better version of yourself and live the life that you deserve, right? Is actually getting to a place where you can actually guide yourself. So I'm going to end this chat with a tip from NLP. And, you know, if you're looking for coaching, get in touch. I do offer payment programs and all this kind of stuff. I have a private free group that you can join. There's a link in here somewhere. If you have any questions about the packages or payment programs, get in touch. My email's on my profile. But basically, in the field of NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, right, there is something that's called the circle of excellence. What you do is you create, right, a scene where you have a kind of circle. And in this circle, right, it's kind of like a portal almost, and you're throwing in everything that you want to be. So if you want more confidence, if you want to feel more valued, if you want to feel more loved, you want to feel more important, you throw all these ideas and feelings into this kind of portal thing, right? And around it, you kind of give it a rim. And in that rim, you give like a gold color or a purple color or a blue color or whatever it is, right? And then what you do is when you're going in, you are ultimately walking in, okay? And there's a little knob that is basically on your bottom right. So I want you to actually imagine this all from the first person, right? And I want you to put a knob at the lower right part of your screen, okay? And what I want you to do is right before you get into it, I want you to ramp up all of the emotions. I want you to ramp up all of them. So let's say if it's more confident, ramp up. Right? If it's feeling more secure in yourself, then more security. If it's more wealth, then feel more wealth. Right? Whatever it is, you throw all of those words and ideas. If you're an image person, throw a house in there. Right? Whatever it is that you line up with these ideas. Okay? Throw it in there. If it's a person having their hands on their hips because that is what you've been taught and how to produce more confidence, which, by the way, it actually does work if you do it 2 minutes a day, right? Is that you ultimately want to throw everything into this kind of portal, okay? Then what you do is I want you to turn up that knob that I just said to create. I want you to feel the ridges on your fingers. Turn it up. And what that's going to do is I want you to ramp up all those feelings. And when you feel like it's too much, ramp it up again. When you feel like it's too much, ramp it up again, okay? And so you're ramping up the emotion. There's another knob that appears. That's going to ramp up the color. Whatever color you chose, gold, purple, blue, it doesn't matter. Fuchsia, I'm not going to judge you. But then just ramp up that one as well. And when you feel like it's too bright, then take it back down, put it medium, but you're going to keep the emotions ramped up. What I want you to do is then I want you to fully walk into this circle that you've created with everything in it already. Now, what I want you to do is I still want you to keep turning up that knob, okay? And then I want you to stand in the middle of the circle and imagine all these qualities, all these objects, all these things not coming around you, but coming through you, okay? And that color's coming through you. And if it's yellow, you are yellow from head to toe. If you're purple, all of you is purple from head to toe. And I want you to just keep ramping it up, ramping it up, ramping it up, right? What this does is it intensifies the scene. Neville says that one of the major reasons why people fail in manifestation is because they don't intensify their scenes enough. Okay, so, and again, always from the state of deserving. But hope this was helpful. I'll be doing these more. I'm going to be doing a series where we meet once a week, probably like some sort of Neville hangout, right? And we're going to deep dive, go into his concepts, maybe even invite some of you up for chats and conversation and all of this kind of stuff. So hope you're having a beautiful Sunday. Get in touch if you're looking for coaching. But other than that, be safe and much love to you all. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Rebecca. Keep me updated, by the way.